Alright guys, so I'm back with another deck profile for One Piece. This time we're going to go back into Enel. Obviously, I think this has probably been one of the more popular decks on my channel, just through multiple deck profiles previously, but now we finally have an updated version for set 7. I wasn't playing or planning on playing this deck too much this set, just because I've played it so much before through 05, 06, EB, and I kind of got a little burnt out on it. But now that the deck actually has a true top end card that is kind of an ace, no pun intended, it's gotten a lot stronger. The consistency feels a lot higher, so you're not missing those top end pieces when you need them as much. And I think overall the deck has gotten just put in a better position. So I'll go through a bit of what I think the deck looks like now. I think most Enel lists are pretty standard. You might see a couple like 1 to 4 card variations, but for the most part I think the list is pretty standard, at least from what I've been seeing and what's topping. So yeah, we'll just go ahead and get through that. For those who don't know what Enel's skill is, defensive leader skill, once per turn during your opponent's turn, when you go down to 0 life, take the top card of your life, put it into your life, and discard 1. So you basically have a 2 life when you're at 1 life and whatnot. So the reason this leader succeeds so much against other players is if they don't know how to play against this deck properly. There's a right way and a wrong way to play against this deck, and if you miss time when to go for game and things like that, you will most likely lose the game just from a resource battle at that point. So getting into it, we will go ahead and just go down with a simple breakdown of what the 2Ks that we are running in the deck are. So obviously we got 4 beige because this trigger is insanely broken. Honestly, it just wins you games sometimes just by making your opponent not able to attack. So it's pretty straightforward and, you know, definitely solid. Next up, we got 3 Flampe and 3 Frankie. The reason behind the 3-3 split is Flampe is really nice when you're at 10 Dawn and you want to take 1 life to go down to 1 for Yamato. It's a really nice play there. It's a good play early game, so you can start building hand early and start building some of those resources more than you normally would. And Frankie, you know, when you're on 1 life, hit it out a trigger, play and draw a card. So not only are you getting wide on your board, but you're also refilling your hand, so you're not going down in card hand advantage. So very good 2Ks across the board. The reason I'm on 3 and 3 instead of 4-4 is just to make space for other cards in the deck. There are a couple other cards that I want to add in just to sort of see how they would feel, and they felt good so far. We'll get into them in a bit. But yeah, I think 10 2Ks, it feels fine. You know, the deck is naturally defensive, and for the most part, we are seeing enough 2Ks just through the cycle of the deck, and it feels good. And I like the spread of these cards. You could run Hiyori if you really wanted to as well, just for some of the other cards that we are running. But I don't think it's super necessary. So this is kind of the spread that I'm on for right now. Next up is there's no early game with this deck. So this is kind of just some of the trigger characters that we do run in the deck. So obviously we got 4 Shirahoshi, we have 4 Onami, and then this obviously isn't a trigger, but it is a very good card, I think, to run right now, which is the 2-drop blocker Shirahoshi. So we'll start with this Shirahoshi, 5-cost Shirahoshi. I think everybody knows it by now. Add a trigger, play it, draw 3, trash 2. Just very good cycle for the deck. We run a lot of top end as well as a lot of bricks that sometimes aren't really useful in the moment. So this just helps us cycle as many cards as we need to. It's also a great card to put back into life with 8-drop Katakuri. So that way we can start, you know, building some resources back, getting that cycle going, and really figuring out, okay, this is what I need to win, this is what I don't need, and just getting that filter. Next up, we got 4 Onami. Onami is really nice right now just because Red Purple Law, Bonnie, Lucci / Gecko Moria, they play a lot of 5 cost and lower units. So being able to KO them early game especially is it's a bit of a tempo swing. So we just, you know, triggered out of life, pop, you know, a Lucci, pop a Cavendish, a 5-drop Kid. It's definitely a very strong trigger. And even when we just hard play, you know, early game, this is really our only early game play. These 2 cards is Onami, put Banish on lead, just swing really tall, just get them down 1 life, and they're not getting the card to hand. And then the 2-drop Shirahoshi, for the black matchup, it is extremely helpful because if you play this on your 2-Dawn or 3-Dawn turn, this thing is just going to be here until the end of the game or until you need it, because they could pop it, which sometimes they do, just to kind of mess with your life so you can't Yamato or Ace effectively. But for the most part, this card is really sticky and sometimes will just be a bit of a wall that your opponent doesn't want to deal with. And it's just proven very helpful. It's proven very nice. It's not something that I think you have to prioritize running, but for me it's been helpful, and I think it's been good in terms of not having to worry too much about, you know, the pressure that black can build up. So next up, this is, we'll actually move this a little bit over to this side. So we do have a bit of a mid game with this deck. What that mid game looks like is 3 Rocket Luffy, we got 4 Gadatsu, and 2 6-drop Parasparrow. So we'll start with the newest addition from 07 is Rocket Luffy. So this card, activate main, you can trash it, and then if you are at 2 or less life, KO one of your opponent's 4 costs or less, and then draw 1 card. So this card is very nice to play on curve if we do go down in life early, and we do want to pop just a 4-drop. There are a lot of times where we prioritize using the KO rather than letting it sit for a turn to then attack, because we would rather just deal with our opponent's body in that moment. So most of the time you will be doing that. You won't get too many swings off with this, but if you do, obviously you're in a better spot than what you would be. But the card draw is extremely nice. Card draw with removal, very good. So you're not going down in hand count, which is really nice. And it's got the trigger effect as well of KOing a 4 cost or less. So just more KO out of trigger, you know, just to annoy our opponent a little bit more. And obviously we got the staple 4 of Gadatsu. So it KOs based off of your opponent's life. If you are playing against black, if you're playing against red, purple, law, usually you keep them around 4 to 5 life, depending on how much you want to go against Rob Lucci. Even against Bonnie, you can keep them at 5 life. That way you can pop their 5 cost Cavendish, Bonnie, stuff like that. So it's an extremely powerful card, especially against red, purple, law, making sure that they can't build up as wide as quickly as possible. And the addition that I've seen sometimes is the 6/8 Parasparrow. This card is really nice because on 6 Dawn, this is pretty much our spread of plays. If we don't have either of these two, well, then we can just develop a really big body. And unless you're playing against black, specifically Lucci, the chances of them being able to remove this on a 7 Dawn turn is pretty low. And a 6/8 body that early, when our opponent knows we're only going to be playing bigger bodies every single turn thereafter, it's a very nice tempo swing. It's very sticky in non-black matchups because, you know, an 8K body, it's not exactly the easiest thing in the world to remove. So I've been having success with it. I like it a lot. It just feels like one more early body that's really big that our opponent has to now worry about, and sometimes they might not be able to deal with it. So that is the bit of the spread for our mid game. Obviously, the most important thing with this deck is the top end. This deck is pretty much all top end or bust. This is what our entire game plan revolves around, and being able to maximize this now as we can with the addition of Ace is only more and more helpful. So what we have for our top end is 4 Ace, 4 Yamato, 4 8-drop Katakuri, and 3 Rush Enel. So we'll start with Rush Ace. 10 drop, 10k, 2 or less life, you can add up to 1 life, and then if you have 2 or less, it gains. Actually, you can add life regardless, but if you are at 2 or less life, once you either choose to add the life or not choose the life, it gains Rush. So the reason why that distinction is important is because there are times when you are at 2 life and you want to play a big body, but Yamato won't refill the life, which kind of sucks. And sometimes 8-drop Katakuri and Rush Enel aren't going to fit what you need in that moment. So being able to regain a life no matter what with Ace, so you could go up to 3, is helpful. Obviously, if you go up to 3, you'll lose the Rush, but sometimes just playing that body and getting that life is fine. It's what you need, and it doesn't feel bad to do so. And the thing that you don't have to give the life. So sometimes if you are in more of an advantageous position, you can choose to just not gain the life and still have a 10k rush unit. That's still a very powerful play, which at times is kind of the closer that you need it to be. Obviously, we got the 9-drop Yamato. KOs based off the total of your life and your opponent's life. So the ideal range for Enel when it goes against any kind of deck is leaving your opponent at 3 life, or depending on the specific deck, 4 life. That way you can start popping 4 and 5 cost units, which are the bulk of a lot of decks currently in the meta, aside from, well, Enel itself, as well as I would say Bonnie to an extent. They have a fair amount of, 5 cost units, but Bonnie is also very top end heavy deck, so it's not super necessary to keep them at high life in that, unless you're trying to stall and starve them out, which is a viable game plan to do against Bonnie with this deck. But yeah, against Red Purple Law, this card is really our main bread and butter. That way we're able to pop, 5-cost Kid, 4-drop Kid Killers, kind of any 4-drop that we need to pop, keep them at 3 life, we go at 1 life, so that way they're just in that constant range and we're just draining resources. 8-drop Katakuri, obviously a great card to play on curve, so we can either remove a big threat from our opponent's board, 8 cost or less, or put back something into our life, or that Shirahoshi. Maybe we played an Onami early, so we can put Onami back into life. That way we have the KO potential that our opponent is going to have to figure out, do I want to swing into this? When do I want to swing into this? Just kind of stuff like that. So it's a really good body. It's good removal for the deck. We have a couple removal options on the deck, not too many. But yeah. Next up, we do have the 7-cost Rush Enel. Most people that I've seen jump between Rush Enel or 7-drop Big Mom. The real difference between the two, I feel, is 7-drop Big Mom is very good. It's very annoying having to decide between trashing and gaining a life, because sometimes it doesn't feel like there's a good decision to make. Putting Enel back up 1 life or going down in 1 life is usually pretty scary, because Enel can usually get big bodies to go wide, which is very interesting. But the reason I like Rush Enel is because in a meta where Lucci is becoming, or is very prominent, having a body that can stick on board as well as apply pressure immediately to a character rather than just life is very nice, because Enel is honestly just a resource management matchup between you and your opponent. You just want to have your opponent just drain them of all resources possible, characters, life, and board, to the point that eventually they won't be able to get rid of any of your big bodies, and you'll just be able to have more big bodies than they can get rid of, and you're refilling your life, you're refilling your resources that way, and then you just KO them kind of in one swoop with all the big bodies that you have on board. So always going after your opponent's characters is usually better with this deck, and Rush Enel lets us do that by swinging into any of their tapped units that they have prior, rather than going into their life and giving them resources. The only types of decks that I would say going into life rather than characters is beneficial is usually 4 costs or 4 life leaders, except for Red Purple Law, just because of how fast they go, how much replenish they do have. So obviously starve out Red Purple Law, I think, is usually the best play. So that is our spread of top end for the deck. And as for the rest of the cards, we just run 6 events in our deck, 3 Kingdom Come and 3 You're the One Who Should Disappear, the 0-cost event. That is absolutely kind of busted, because I feel like every single game I play against Enel, they always have this as their last life in almost every single game. It's kind of crazy. Now, you could definitely argue that you should run both of these out of 4 of. The reason I'm choosing to not run them out of 4 of is honestly just because I'm running 2 of the Parasparrow. I like the Parasparrow, it just feels good to me. You don't have to. You could just run both of these out of 4 of and be perfectly fine, because they're both very strong cards. This one obviously is a beige 2.0, if we want to call it that, because having the life versus negating an attack is actually better, because then you have a chance to trigger into something else. So this is really just a beige 2.0, and it helps because we have so many dead cards in our deck that ditching them for 3k is really good. Kingdom Come, obviously it's based off of KOing your opponent's character. It just KOs something flat. Obviously you have to go down to 1 life, so whether you're at 1 life or you have to trash to 1 life, you have to make that decision. But this card is really our saving grace against decks like Bonnie, who have high life counts, who play big bodies consecutively. We need this to see this card to KO their Zoros, to KO their 10-cost Doflamingos. Anything below that, obviously we have Katakuri that can deal with stuff. But Zoro is really, the 9-drop Secret Rare Zoro is really a big threat to this deck. So making sure that we see this so that we can KO it is extremely important. And that's why I'd say if you want to run it at 4, you can. It really comes down to what you feel comfortable doing and what you want to do. So yeah, that is the deck list for this format that I am running. I think the deck functions very well, and most of it, how you should play it this set, is really focusing on just draining your opponent's resources. I would say the worst matchup for this deck is probably Red Purple Law, just because sometimes they can go too fast, but I've noticed that we are pretty effective at stalling them out enough to where they don't have enough resources through our Gadatsus, through our Luffy's, through Kingdom Come, that it's a lot more manageable. And now that we have Ace as a primary life regainer and putting pressure on our opponent, it feels a lot better to play into that late game now more than ever. So I think I would recommend really playing the resource game in 90% of your matchups, because you will be able to out resource your opponent eventually, assuming that let's say for black, for example, they drop 8-drop Isho, that is probably the card that hurts you the most. So being able to get rid of that quickly and early is definitely what you need to do. But for the most part, you can play the resource game against any deck. Blue is a little weird because 10-drop Kaido and stuff like that, they can build resources back very quickly in just one fell swoop. So, but yeah, other than that, let me know if you guys want to see any sort of matchups with this deck. It is fun. I honestly hate playing against yellow, so I'm kind of joining the train yet again. I've been off of it for this entire set so far, but it is still fun to play here and there. But I hate playing against yellow. I think most people hate playing against yellow just because of how much there is skill involved to it, but there is also a larger element of RNG than any other color in the deck for obvious reasons. So it's a fun deck. It's a pretty straightforward deck in terms of most of the plays that you're doing. Like it's either once you get into the late game, it's either of these like 5 different cards that you're going to be playing, and that's pretty much it. So let me know if you guys want to see any gameplay for that. I can definitely get that out. Definitely appreciate the support on all the videos I've done so far. They've done a lot better than I ever thought would really be possible. So let me know if you guys have any questions for any tech choices, options that you guys are considered running, matchup spreads, details, stuff like that. Can definitely answer any of those in the comments. I guess just real quick in terms of, you know, the big 5 matchups that you can expect. Red Purple Law, I think they're favored, but definitely starve them out. That's your best bet. Lucci and Gecko Moria, they are, I would say keep them in that 4 to 3 life range until you can get wide. Prioritize Yamatos a lot in that matchup, so you can start popping their Luccis, Rebecca's, Sabos, and keep them in that kind of range until you can just drain their resources enough. That is really your best bet. As well as dealing with 8-drop Isho with Katakuri. I think seeing Katakuri in those matchups is extremely important, so I would also prioritize seeing that. Black Yellow Luffy, I do believe we are favored into Black Yellow Luffy just because we're perfectly fine with not attacking their life, and then we just build really big bodies. That is usually just a go-to strategy, and it's very hard for them to close out game with Sabo blockers and stuff like that, just because they get worried about, do I tap the Sabo blockers and try to push or what? So I think we are favored in that matchup. Bonnie, I would say Bonnie is favored for them slightly. It really depends on if we can see Kingdom Come every single time that we need to see it, as well as making sure we get enough big bodies to establish and really just be able to pressure their life very quickly and deal with their board. That one is definitely more of a, I would say, in their favor, definitely a little bit more 50-50, but it's still a winnable matchup, still very possible. What other matchups do we have? I guess you could consider Blue Doflamingo. I would say Blue Doflamingo is kind of favored against this just because with the new addition of cards they have, like the Jinbei, they can get wide very quickly on you, and they also have 10-drop Kaido. And because we don't exactly put too much pressure in the early game, it's a very good chance that they can play 10-drop Kaido safely and really build their resources. And our only answer to 10-drop Kaido is Kingdom Come. But at least we do have an answer now to deal with it if we need to. So that is a bit of what I would consider the matchups that you do need to worry about. In the mirror as well, the mirror is extremely annoying, extremely long. It kind of feels like whoever attacks first is at a disadvantage. So I think that's something that people will probably need to practice for if they do play this deck, is how to deal with the mirror. But yeah, other than that, that's kind of my thoughts on all the matchups. I don't think there's one matchup that's, you know, unwinnable or anything like that. I think it's pretty even across the board for the most part. But if you guys have any questions like that, definitely hit me up in the comments below. Please definitely make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. You guys have been insane with that. The support has been really insane, like I said. And I'll get a gameplay video out in the next couple of days if I can. Let me know what matchups you guys want to see in particular, if I can hopefully get some specific ones that you guys are looking forward to showcase. And yeah, we'll go ahead with that. But other than that, guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for all the support. Appreciate it. And we'll catch you next time.